Contingencies. Without a doubt, you have heard this term thrown around in real estate, and chances are you are still very confused. No one really talks about what those contingencies are when you're buying a home, typically until you're ready to actually write an offer, and then you are faced with reading through a sales contract and figuring out what it means. Hi, I'm Bethany, and I'm a realtor with Keller, Palmetto, in Columbia, South Carolina. I've been helping my own real estate clients for over 18 years, so I know exactly what you need to know about buying your own home. If you want to make your home buying journey a lot easier, first give me a thumbs up, like this video, and then keep listening, because today I'm going to share the most common home buying contingencies that you'll see along your journey. What exactly is a contingency? It is a future event that is possible but not certain. It is a condition of the sale. It's basically an if-then situation. If you do your chores, then you can go to the movies. If you eat your broccoli, then you can have dessert. If the home appraises, then I will buy it. The appraisal hasn't been done. That is a future event, and you are not 100% sure of the outcome yet because it hasn't happened. So that is what a contingency is. It's really not that complicated. The second thing we want to dive into is just remembering some real estate basics. I always like to kind of bring us back to the basics here. And the first important thing that you need to remember is that real estate is local. Common contingencies in one area may not frequently be seen in another. And you really need to keep that in mind. Just because something is common in one state or even in one city, it doesn't mean that it's going to be common, frequent, acceptable to most home sellers in another city or in another state. The second thing that you always want to remember is, what does your contract say? The contract and any addendums that you sign, those are going to be the governing documents to your transaction. It spells out the rules of the if-then contingency scenarios. It tells you your obligations where contingencies are concerned and your rights, and it explains the seller's obligations and their rights under those contingency terms. So make sure you know what your contract says. Now, if you don't understand your contract, whether it's the entirety of the contract or one piece or multiple key pieces, please be sure to bring this up to your agent, ask questions, allow them to explain the logistics of how contingencies frequently play out in your scenario and in your market. And if you don't understand the legalities of the contract that you're getting ready to sign, strongly encourage you to please consult a real estate attorney who can explain it to you and give you peace of mind before you obligate yourself to something that you don't really fully understand. And last but not least is, you definitely want to plan to discuss your specific needs with your real estate agent up front. If you think you might have certain contingencies or special situations that you need to have accounted for when you're making an offer and negotiating an offer to buy a home, please be sure to talk to your agent about that up front. You don't want to be in a position where you're filling the offer out and that is when you're telling your agent about special needs that you have. You definitely want to make sure that they know that up front before you get out there in the trenches and start looking at homes. So let's get into some of the common contingencies that you're going to see in most real estate contracts, no matter where you are buying. And the biggest one that I see home buyers concerned about is the inspection contingency, sometimes called a due diligence contingency. And what this part of the contract does is it tells you as the buyer, first and foremost, do you have the right to inspect and or re-inspect? How much time do you have to do that? How much time do you have to review the results? And once you get those results, what are your options for remedy? Can you ask for repairs? Can you ask for some type of financial monetary remedy for repairs? Maybe it's a concession to a specific contractor, or maybe it is a price reduction, or paying some closing cost in lieu of a repair or repair credit to a contractor. factor. It also will tell you how much time the seller has to respond to your request. And if you don't like the seller's response, what are your options at that point? Can you terminate? Can you walk away and say, hey, this situation is not for me. I need to go find a home that's a better fit. Or do you have the option to continue negotiating? So that is what an inspection or due diligence contingency is it spells out all the rules, the timelines, the deadlines, and the options that you and the seller have for inspecting, digesting those results, and what options you have moving forward. The second most common contingency is going to be your financing contingency, and that is going to spell out the details of what happens if you cannot get approved for your loan. We're not talking the initial pre-qualification or pre-approval. We're talking about that final loan approval that after 2 to 3 weeks, your mortgage lender and the underwriting department, they have combed through your finances, your incomes, your debts, your liabilities, your credit, your taxes, your income taxes, and everything, and they have signed off and given you that final loan seal of approval that you are financially qualified and capable of purchasing this home. Financing contingency spells out how much time you have to do that, what happens if you cannot get approved for a loan, and if you cannot get final approved and move forward with closing on that sale, what financial penalties could, not always, but could possibly come your way. At what point in the process could you face some financial penalty? An example of which would be losing earnest money. And who gets that earnest money? Does the seller get it? Do you get to keep it? What happens to that money? A good example in Columbia, South Carolina, the Board of Realtors contract that we use, the financing contingency says that in the event that you are not approved, final approved to purchase the home, the earnest money would go back to you as the purchaser unless it happens within 5 business days of closing. If it happens within 5 business days of closing and you get denied financing, then you could potentially lose your earnest money. Contractually, our contract has the earnest money going to the seller. And if you think about it, that makes sense because most closings that are getting financing are going to take 30 to 45 days. And 5 business days, that's basically a week within a closing date. That means a lender has had 3 to 5 weeks, if we're closing 30 to 45 days, they've had 3 to 5 weeks to fully vet your finances. And if you're within the week of closing and that's when you're getting denied financing, it really shouldn't be left up to the seller to kind of have to hold the bag and take the financial hit on that. So the earnest money in our contract would go to the seller at that point, kind of to incentivize the buyer and the lender to always have their act together and be proactive to go through that underwriting and final approval process quickly. Some other things that are spelled out in a financing contingency could be what happens if you decide to change lenders? What happens if you decide to change the type of loan that you're going to get? If you move from conventional to FHA or FHA to conventional, or if you made your offer as a cash offer and you decide you want financing, what happens under those terms? What happens if you're denied financing? Do you have a right to reapply with someone else? Do you have to notify the seller of these events? How long do you have to notify them? So those are the types of things that a financing contingency is going to spell out. Third, we have our appraisal contingency. And this if-then situation is going to tell you what happens if the home does not appraise for the sales price or more. It will tell you at what point you have to notify the seller of this, whether or not the seller is entitled to receive a copy of that appraisal. And it's also going to tell you how long you have to decide whether or not you would like to continue to move forward with the purchase by coming up with the additional funds, or if you have the right to terminate your contract if the seller does not want to renegotiate the price with you. Coming in at number 4, we have the sale and closing of a home contingency. We have not seen that for the last couple of years because inventory levels have been so low. We've had multiple offers on homes, so Sellers really haven't needed to accept a sale and closing contingency because they had 20 other offers that they could consider that did not have that contingency. But as things are slowing down, I do believe that we are going to see more sellers willing to consider especially closing contingency. And you also might see more sellers willing to consider both a sale and closing contingency. So what exactly are those? A closing contingency is when the buyer owns a home already. They have it under contract. So you, the buyer, already own a home. You have it for sale, and you've already found a buyer for your home, and you're under contract with a buyer to purchase your current home. But you still need to go and buy something new for yourself, right? You have to have somewhere to live. So you would write your offer contingent on your current home closing, and you would have to provide details to the seller of the home you want to purchase about the sale of your home so that they can confirm it is under contract, understand what the terms of your contract are and what those deadlines are that you're working towards on the sale of your home. That gives them confidence that you will be able to move forward and close out on the sale of their home that they're trying to sell to you. Then you have a sale and closing contingency, and that is for a buyer who has a home that they need to sell, but it is not under contract yet. But they still need to and want to purchase another home. So if you as the buyer needed to sell your home, it's not under contract yet, but you've already found a home you want to purchase, you might make an offer to that homeowner contingent on both the sale and closing of your home. And depending on what market you're in and what your contract and your contingencies say, the rules of those contingencies, whether it's a closing or a sale and closing contingency, could be very different on your time frames and what benchmarks you have to hit. Number 5, we have our backup contract contingency. This has become increasingly more popular over the last couple of years to have a buyer agree to be a backup offer. A backup offer is when a seller has chosen someone else to be the primary offer and they are under contract moving forward with that primary buyer to sell them the home. But you really like the house. You're hoping maybe something happens. It would be terrible for the other buyer, but great for you. You were hoping something happens to their contract and that contract and deal falls through so that you, the backup buyer, can automatically move into primary position and purchase that home. A lot of buyers over the last couple of years were very successful in negotiating backup contracts, and that was one way some buyers were successful in getting homes for themselves, is because they were willing to take that backup position. And a lot of times primary deals fall through for any number of reasons. But a backup offer is a type of contingency, and you want to read through that backup contingency to see what it says. Is there any difference as a backup offer in when my earnest money is due? Is there any difference in when I would move forward with things like the inspection period? When do my timelines kick in as the backup buyer? What happens when the primary offer falls through? What happens if I don't want to be the backup buyer anymore because I found another home and I want to make an offer on it? Those are the types of scenarios and timelines and if-then situations that a backup contract contingency will cover. And then at this point, you start to run into kind of more personal and situational contingencies that are going to be personal and situational, specific to you as the home buyer or to the home itself. Some examples would be, what if there is a home and you are just adamant that you need to have a pool? You want to confirm that a pool can be installed. You might choose to have a separate contingency, some type of language within your contract that makes the contract contingent on you confirming that a pool can be installed. Another good example would be getting approval of construction plans from whatever body happens to govern that aspect of real estate. You see this a lot of times, especially a great example would be we have a lot of historic districts in Columbia, South Carolina, and a lot of these historic districts have special overlays that they're a part of, and they might be in like a preservation district. And if you want to, say, add a carport onto the side of your 100-year-old home, you might not be able to do that without approval from the design board. Here in Columbia, that's going to be a part of city government. You would have to have plans drawn up. You would have to submit those plans for review. Staff and the board would review them, comment on them, approve if it can be done, and then the materials that you use, the style that it might be done in, so that whatever you do is in keeping with the historic and architectural nature of the neighborhood. This doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. You might run into some contingencies involving the seller. The homeowner might have some contingencies of their own to throw in. One of those contingencies could be finding their own home to buy. It doesn't happen often, but I have had happen a few times where a seller has put in the contract that this contract is contingent on us, the seller, finding a home to purchase and maybe clearing that inspection and appraisal contingency on our home purchase. And only after we have done that are we willing to move forward with selling our home to you, the buyer. While the word itself can make it sound big and scary and complicated, contingencies are a completely normal part of the home buying process. Another normal part of the process is trying to decide where to move. Whether you're relocating or trying to decide just what part of town you want to live in, wherever you happen to be now, click the video on your screen and let's learn how to make a great decision for you on where you decide to live.